Hello everyone and welcome to Phoenix Gaming. I am your host Dick Henning and today we are covering the Wingspan 2024 Ring Final. I am excited for this game. I spent a lot of time learning Wingspan last year because it ended up being the game that I played. I did not play it in 24, did in 23. So I think I've got a pretty good grasp of this game, and I got to rub a lot of respect on a 100-minute final played by 4 players. So you know me, I love that extra speed, but I'm actually just going to play this at normal speed because it seems like all 4 of these players are playing at a pace that is pretty good. They're just doing some setup here. All the players doing kind of the shuffling and cutting. So I'm sure they'll pass out the cards here in a second, but I figured it would give me a moment to do my introduction here as we run around the table. I'm actually not quite sure who is first seat, but we've got Henry in the top left, David in the top right, Angela in the bottom right, and Shaw in the bottom left. Angela is probably the most recognizable person at this table. If you know anything about WSBG, you know that in 2023 she won $25,000 by being the person who won the event off of the back of ringing the Castles of Burgundy ring. Now that's a fun fact because Shaw, sitting to Angela's left there, was also in the 2023 Castles of Burgundy final. I believe they were playing a 3-player game at the time, so it looks like these two are paired up yet again in another final. David is the one player at this table that I have really no connection with, so I'll be very curious to see how he conducts himself in this game. Holy crap, a Raven off the top of the deck. That is dirty for whoever is going first, and we see a lot of cheeky smiles around the table as the players are getting excited here. Henry is, I think he's been attending WSBG maybe for 2 years now, but I actually met him this past year. He introduced himself. He's very excited, very eager to get into the more and more into the competitive scene. So exciting to see him at the Wingspan final here. I don't know who's first seat here. First seat is generally the favored seat when you are playing Wingspan, because not only do you get your initial look at your 5 cards in hand, just like everybody else, but you are the first one to be able to draw the 3 cards off the top of the display there. And so whoever is first seat here is going to get that crack at that Chihuahua. I think it's the Chihuahua Raven. It's definitely one of the Ravens. I think it's the Chihuahua one. And is going to be just kind of leaps and bounds ahead of their other opponents, knowing that they'll be able to play towards that in the beginning of round 2. WSBG does play a Wingspan house rule where you are not allowed to play any of the 4 power birds, the Franklin's Gull, the Killdeer, or either of the big boy ravens, the Chihuahua Raven and the Raven. In the first essentially round of the game, right? So before the scoring for the first round. So the kind of meta strategy is to collect them and then basically formulate your entire game plan around your first play in, we'll say Act 2 or Round 2, is to put that Raven into play and then start going whole hog. I think that this actually makes the Ravens stronger than the Killdeer or the Franklin's Gull, which are still good cards, but the Ravens are just so expensive to get into play at the beginning, costing 3 food to drop into play. They usually takes a fair amount of infrastructure to get them set up. So I would actually say that the Power Ravens remain that kind of like S+ tier in Wingspan, just the absolute backbreaking cards. And Killdeer and Franklin's Gull just drop down to a regular S tier card. Given that the card draw really is more important at the beginning of the game. And of course, it does matter when you draw these if you can kind of formulate a game plan around it. So again, whoever is in first seat here is going to be able to formulate their game plan around the fact that their first action is going to be drawing that Chihuahua Raven. Now, they can't actually play it until round 2 at all. So, you know, your strategy, if you are in first seat here and you are picking up that Chihuahua Raven, is to make sure you end round 1 with a rat and 2 food of any type. So you just need to make sure that you're kind of manipulating that situation. And I will point out, interestingly enough, that there actually are no rats in the bird feeder right now. The bird feeder does generally cycle in the first round because not only is it 8 actions, but everyone is in need of food at the beginning of the game so they can start playing out their birds. So, you know, there's a chance that another rat will be rolled, but there is something to be said about being cautious or wary of what might happen, selecting to keep a rat at the beginning with the idea of keeping it throughout the entire round to the end, just in case the dice don't cooperate with you. Of course, you could make a plan to kind of take any 2 resources rather than the rat, but why do that when you can be a little bit more clever around it? We see Angela here is holding on to some very high point cards. as well as the Morning Dove, and taking just one resource. So actually, I guess one high point card, one card that lets her play a second into the forest, and then the Morning Dove, which lets you make eggs in rows that are not the egg row. Looks like she's going to keep 2 resources here. Certainly the grain for that Morning Dove for very early play. And I guess she was first, so my instinct is that Angela was the starting player here. I don't know that you need a Morning Dove when you have a Chihuahua Raven. Your egg problems are essentially solved by playing the Chihuahua Raven over and over again, but I guess she did not have terribly exciting things in her hand. It's also a little bit interesting to see her kept the double play into the Forest Bird, because it's not really that great in terms of points. It does fill up the row. So I guess it depends on if it matches those objectives. The objectives are a little bit difficult for me to see. I'm going to just wing it. And I know that second one is eggs in water. That first one looks like it's eggs in bowls. And then that third one looks like it's a certain kind of bird with a certain kind of eggs, right? The pebble eggs or something like that. And then the last one looks like it's birds and forests. And so that actually does explain why Angela kept that double play into the forest. She doesn't need any forest infrastructure, thanks to knowing that she's going to be able to grab that Chihuahua Raven. But being able to just dump a bunch of birds into the forest at the end of the game is very powerful. She's going to lead off with a draw and grab the Chihuahua Raven here. Everyone has a little chuckle about how incredibly far ahead this puts Angela right at the beginning of the game. Shaw flips up. It's a double play. We got a lot of double play birds in play right now. These are not the most exciting at the beginning. They are cool in terms of action efficiency, but they're a bit awkward because you need to have the extra egg in order to play the second animal, and so they can't be your first animal played, but you might not have enough cards really to kind of play them and something else. Or if you have one thing and then you're going over to 3 things, it's not especially special. Going straight to 2 is good, but you need to have played some other bird first. Shaw here grabs a berry. So 2 berries and a worm. There's only a couple of birds that ask for that kind of thing. Henry right here is going to lead with a pretty expensive bird. I believe that's a bird that gets you more food, and it lives in the forest. So it's an expensive start, but it's a way to get essentially that food engine running early. And then David Hobson is going to play one of these birds that lets you, I don't know all the bird names. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. Is going to play one of these birds that draws you an extra card when you're doing the draw action, giving himself extra dig into the deck. It's my personal opinion that leading with those water birds is one of the most important things you can do in the game. Drawing into a game plan is very, very essential. Angela here just scooping up an extra grain. This is going to allow her to play her Morning Dove, I guess, and then kind of cycle through. I'm trying to actually wonder what that berry is for. I think it's because she was going to play out that forest bird, but like I said, I would have maybe kept the rat instead. And here we see it. It's a Baltimore Oriole. This is a massively expensive bird that just gives everybody resources at the beginning of the game. Normally, a Baltimore Oriole is not an exciting early game card, but I actually think that there's something really to be said about this because, first of all, it does a lot in terms of meeting objectives. It's a wild bird, so it's going to meet most of those objectives. It's in the forest there, and sharing birds that give extra food to folks, to everybody, tend to be most advantageous to folks who do not have food engines. And guess who has a food engine right now? Henry does, because he's already laid down a bird for getting an extra food. And Angela does, because she has the Chihuahua Raven that's coming out. So Shaw and David actually are really incentivized to play these sort of friendly, everybody get tons of food birds, because they can essentially keep up with Angela and Henry's increased food efficiency by playing those birds. So I really like that in this instance. And if we see a couple more of them, it can really mitigate the effect of the Raven. Looks like they're looking up the rules here. My guess is they're discussing whether they should be re-rolling the dice so that Henry can trigger one of those birds that gets something out of the feeder. We're doing the you have to hit the table until the die falls down roll. And fortunately for Angela, we will rip a couple of rats here, which is going to help her out a lot. And Henry will go to the bank to draw that wheat. I wonder if there's actually, I think I did find a Wingspan birds. Oh, this is, of course, I'm running off of my, let's do a new tab, new window. We'll get that out of the way there. Let's see if I can find Wingspan birds. Okay, interesting. So this is a bird for David, and his bird, the turn, I think, below is a starbird. So anytime anyone's going to be laying eggs, David's going to be able to lay an egg as well, which is going to be really nice for his action efficiency at the beginning of the game. It's not common that I'll play that bird at the beginning, but it is going to work here. Morning Dove for Angela. Looks like it's going into the drawing habitat, drawing cards habitat. That makes sense. I think actually Angela in her starting hand might have had no birds that sat in the water area, which does actually, now that I'm thinking about it, make a lot more sense about why you would grab the Morning Dove. Having even just one bird in the water area means that you can convert eggs into a second drawing card, because you can get 2 eggs with a single action versus 1 card or 1 food with a single action at the beginning of the game. Putting just that second bird down there is going to increase your drawing efficiency. And if you were playing with a crow, like Angela is, the primary concern you have in terms of how efficient you're going to be in the game is, how am I going to be able to draw throughout the course of the game? Shaw's going to make everybody a little bit richer here. Hopefully that's a situation where she is essentially looking into playing something immediately with that food. You don't want to just be jamming that free food for everybody constantly, particularly at this stage of the game where, for instance, Angela's Raven has not turned online yet. And Henry, having played an expensive bird already, has a whole pile of food left. He grabs the pelican-y, storky thing. I'm gonna get just killed online by all the bird fans out there. That lets you play two birds into the wetlands. It's a good choice for him now because he's got somewhere where he can lay eggs. I was just kind of talking about how they can be difficult earlier, but he's got a bird that he can lay eggs on. He can then dump that guy and another water guy down into that waterland really quickly to get double draws and get himself started early. David, unfortunately, does not get essentially the free egg that he's hoping to get off of the other players, so he will plant his own eggs here. This makes it really awkward. If everybody chooses to lay eggs right now, he actually can't even take advantage because he's got no nest space available, so he's got to be really interested to grab that. Angela just grabs straight up the point bird off of the tray there. Really not too interested in digging to any engine stuff, which is not traditionally how you'd play, but she's acknowledging very correctly and powerfully that she's got essentially the Raven. The Raven's going to give her the food that she needs in order to play these expensive birds out. Shaw here is going to go for a draw. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Condor here, a free play that lets her put kind of maybe like a second thing into the forest or even a first thing into the wetland. Might be that she has absolutely no wetland cards, along with some bonus cards, is a nice one. I really like the Condor. I think it's an easy play. Obviously, it doesn't do much for your infrastructure, but it's really helpful. Oh, fascinating. When I move my mouse, you can see over there. So let's move this stuff. Okay, we're still good there. Trying to see if I can I remember I did this last year. I've got the bird site that shows only the shadows of the birds, I think for legal reasons. There's like a GitHub that you can search all the bird cards. Let's see if I can make this not include expansion birds. And these players, they really know exactly what they're doing. They are moving around the table at a very comfortable speed. Everyone is kind of trying to execute their game plan here. We're getting some draws off. I think it's a Barn Swallow is a very, very nice card. The Starbird that is pretty cheap to put into play, flexible in terms of where it goes, and allows you to just constantly be cycling cards out of your hand for victory points. Even though it itself is not worth that many points, we're going to see Angela very quickly snap that up and then probably use this egg from the Morning Dove to draw an additional card. So she is just filling her hand full of things, knowing that she's going to go to Raven World pretty soon and then essentially just turn into doing eggs and playing cards. She drew a Mallard off the top there, which is pretty pretty bad, I think, actually, at this stage in the game. Well, I guess that's not necessarily true. She can play it into the wetland and lets her like draw lots and lots of cards, but she's already got a grip of, was that six birds there? I actually wonder if taking that 6-point Merganser and throwing it into the wetlands would have been a better option for her at this stage of the game. She's played out, I think, 5 actions right now. One of her actions probably is going to be scoop up that rat that's sitting in the bird feeder. And I think when there's not exciting things to be drawing from the center, that is going to be what she's doing next. The other card I would have considered drawing in her position is the Great Horned Owl. Shaw is going to scoop that rat actually out of the bird feeder there. So Angela might be punished for pushing the cards, which is fair because they were good birds to grab at the time. And a rat grab here for Shaw is very interesting. Lots and lots of berries for everyone means actually Angela at this point does not need to be concerned about grabbing that rat out of the tray because she could just trade 2 berries in for 1 rat. David is, in a lot of ways, the best recipient of Shaw's beneficiousness, generosity here, because he has no food available, it looks like, to him, except for the berries that were given to him. He kind of used the food that he kept at the beginning to play those out, so this gives him a little bit more flexibility with his hand. Henry looks like he's ripping cards off the top of the deck. My guess is that maybe he doesn't have a water bird in his drawing towards one, but I kind of wonder if that is the case, if, again, he should take the Merganser. It's not a very good card in terms of its power, but it is worth 6 points, and it does play into the wetland. So if he's looking for a second wetland bird to play with his pelican-y, storkin-y thing, I think that would make a big difference here. Let me see if I can get the right names of these birds while David is thinking here. Where are we at, my bird friends? Condor, cedar waxwings. It's not a grebe. Common raven is the other raven. That's the one I was missing there. Could tell from their outlines, right? Like that's a great blue heron. Oh, that's embarrassing. I have a blue heron in my pond. I should have known. I don't think it's a great blue heron. I think it's just a blue heron, if that's a thing. But yeah, definitely should have known that. Henry, he does not draw cards, so he actually goes and gets some resources. He scoops up a fish, which I think communicates that he is planning on playing the Great Blue Heron along with some other fishy water card. And we get a full reroll here. No rats, which I'm just harping on because we know Angela's hand, because she holds her hand in such a way that we actually get to interact with her hand. So great appreciation there. I do wonder if the way she holds her hand, Shaw gets to interact with her hand too. It is pretty forward on the table. Morning dove. Where is this duck? Duck-like thing. Again, I'm just going to get lambasted in the comments for ducks and Mergansers, and I can't even find it. It's pretty distinct looking. That's just a ruddy duck. You should check out this website, and you'll see exactly what I'm having a laugh at. Navarog.github. David scoops up some grubs, it looks like, and Angela says, you know what? I will play out into the wetlands here. Oh, I misread her bird. Her bird is not a play 2 into the forest. It is a draw bonus cards into the forest. That is very interesting. That makes a lot more sense as a keep in terms of like, I'm just going to keep victory point cards. I don't need any engine in the forest. I like that keep a lot more. I was kind of talking about it at the beginning of the game. I don't think I like that it was being played now, because now Angela actually kind of needs to scramble to get food back. And I think that that's not she doesn't necessarily have enough time to do that. That being said, she can run the forest right now and discard a card to pick up 2 food. So maybe it's not that big a deal since she's, I guess, potentially planning on pitching something out of her hand, but it's a little bit awkward. It's a little bit less efficient than I think the dream efficiency would be. Shaw draws, I think, the Great Horned Owl. Basically, Shaw's just like, I'm going to play big birds. They're going to be worth points, and that's my game. I wouldn't be surprised to see Shaw pay both of these rats and both of these berries at the beginning of the next turn to do exactly that. Although she needs to make some eggs first, so it's going to be eggs, and then potentially followed by this. It looks like she is debating whether she wants to be friendly and distribute a bunch of berries right now, which I think is actually a fair caution at this stage. She knows that she has the resources to play what she wants to play, and so might want to actually kind of pump the brakes a little bit on the generosity and let other players scramble a little bit, particularly Angela, who we see at this point is a little bit food shy of being able to lead round 2 with the Raven. I keep talking about the Raven, and I realize that that is probably exhausting to hear, but it is actually so game warping that I think the other players have to play around and respect how powerful it is if they're hoping to essentially keep pace in the course of the game. I'll try one more time to find this duck thing because I want to get it right. It's a common loon. It's not even a merganser. Ah, what a fool I've been. And there Henry goes, grabbing the common loon. So he grabbed that fish last turn, and then basically the common loon remained available. So almost certainly we're going to see him play out the common loon along with the heron there, which is interesting. Means that Henry and I are in sync right here. That right there, my friends, is a cedar waxwing. I'm having a laugh because I mentioned him earlier. It allows you, I believe, to turn cards into berries. So just piles and piles and piles of berries going to be available for David here. He doesn't really have too much of a drawing engine so far. I think the cedar waxwing is pretty unexciting, actually. Yeah, tuck a card from your hand if you do gain a berry, but it costs 2 berries, which he had gifted to him through Shaw. So the convenience of playing it is certainly worth the lack of impact of its relative power, I think. Angela's going to scoop up some food from the tray here. And actually only scoops of 1 food from the tray, interestingly enough. Shaw is going to grab the aforementioned eggs. This is also putting Shaw in the position of scoring the objective for the round, which I think Angela's bird and Henry's bird are probably both bull birds. So everybody's kind of contesting it right now. And there's sort of this like cute question of like, well, what will we decide to do with our actions with our birds? This is one small advantage of going later in the round, is that Henry's going to get to see what Angela and Shaw do in terms of like whether he wants to actually contest this. He's going to spend one of those eggs right now and going down to drop the heron and the loon, just like he talked about, getting himself his card draw engine up. And, you know, frankly, points wise, he's sitting at something like 17 points right now, which is not too bad for the first couple birds of the game. He doesn't look so happy though. They aren't powerful birds for sure. The bird that he played up top, whose name I don't know. I guess I could. The problem with the forest birds is that they all look the same. In shadow form, just in shadow form. Obviously, their colors are glorious and they're wonderful birds that a person should not be skeptical about. David here considering his card draw options. I don't think anything there is too exciting for him. Honestly, actually, I think Angela would maybe consider that stilt walker-y thing because it draws more cards just for playing birds out. It's actually quite good for a Raven situation. Angela's going to spend her last action putting those birds into play. David's finally going to get his freebie. Actually, he probably got it when Shaw ran last turn. And it's the rose-breasted grosbeak for Henry, which gets either grain or berries out of the feeder, which makes a lot of sense. Shaw here has to decide about whether she wants to keep tied with these 2 eggs or not. And she's going to play out the condor here. Not mess with any of the eggs. This is going to keep her tied for first place for this round, which really just means that like everybody in first place is only going to score 1 point because the unfriendly ties that exist in Wingspan. Using the condor to draw a couple cards here. The only thing that's awkward about this is that Shaw, I think, could have if the sequencing had been slightly different. Shaw could have played this, laid eggs, then drawn the Great Horned Owl, but then also would be down to just one egg if she wanted to have drawn a second card here. So the sequencing for Shaw didn't work out great this turn. I think this is kind of, I get the vibe like her starting hand birds were again, you don't play the Oriole often at the beginning of the game. So not the ideal starting picks in terms of lack of engine. Henry here is debating, do I lay eggs and just kind of triple tie with Angela and Shaw? It's not particularly exciting to do so. He will only score essentially one additional point for doing it. He doesn't actually need the extra eggs because he's got an egg available to him right now to play another bird probably into the forest to get into those first two columns completed to increase the efficiency of the food action. So it might just be time to draw cards. Or he's just going to actually play a bird out. It looks like he's playing an American Crow, which is the Raven's kind of less powerful brother, but I think playing him into the grasslands there is a good call. He looks miserable about this choice, even though I think it's quite a good card. So I'm not minding his position. He's got 4 birds in play. Like, his engine is not strong, but he has the most points right now and actually is setting the pace. And if he's able to keep tempo throughout the course of the game, that's going to be really great for him. He's going to be second player next turn. It does depend on it. Shaw is going to be first, probably going to draw some cards. She's going to get first crack at it. She has that extra egg now on the Oriole, so she'll be able to draw 2 cards off the display. But it's possible that Shaw and Henry are interested in drawing different cards off the display because they have slightly different circumstances available to them at this stage. We're going to get some eggs laid by David Hobson here. Which is going to be awkward only in the sense that, and a pitch of a card for some food here. Awkward only in the sense that I think he is now full on eggs. And so he's hoping that Shaw or Henry are not going to lay eggs on their next turn to essentially skip over the ability for him to use the free power on that bird there. Being capped out there is not ideal. But he also probably wasn't looking at anything he was too excited to draw. I personally think I would have run the card row as David in this instance and just ripped some cards off the top of the deck, consuming one of my eggs. But I'm going to assume that he's got a follow-up plan here, or just wants to be more efficient in his actions and see more options in the display rather than drawing randomly off the top of the deck. Nothing too crazy here. I think that third bird is one of those birds that gives everybody a grub when it's in play. So as I said before, I think that is slightly better, given that, we're in a pause here. All right, we'll pause. Let me finish my thought here. I think that that bird is slightly better because everyone being able to get things is going to keep pace with the awesome drawing or the awesome food engine that is available to the Raven. All right, let's pause. And we're back at it. Shaw is taking a draw action here, ripping off the top. Not too excited. I think that the sharing bird would be a respectable choice for her, assuming that I'm right that it is the sharing bird. And she agrees, actually. She's going to use her egg as a second pickup there to do that, flipping I think that's a titmouse off the top. The Bob White is not a bad option in terms of it's got a lot of egg capacity, but it's very expensive to play, so it might not be worth it. Magpie there, not looking terribly good with no hunters in play just yet, and even still, don't love when other people are in control of the impact of my cards. That's not to say that they're bad, but they are kind of difficult to engage with. Henry here rips a random off the top of the deck before deciding what he wants to do with the second one. He's saying to himself, do these other birds do what I want them to do? And the answer is no. I think that's fair. The titmouse, I think, operates kind of, I think it's a caching one. Let's double check. I think that's a caching bird. Let's find out. Cache 1 from the supply on this bird. Yeah, and I don't think it's a hollow bird, so I don't think it matches that third objective, even though I can't quite see it. But Henry does want a second bird in his grassland, and it costs a grain, which is something that Henry might be interested in. We're going to see a lot more draws off the top here. Basically, everyone agreeing that these guys here are not exciting enough to really compete, so we're going to just go fishing and see what we can get. Draw a third card here and discard one. David gets the final choice as he contemplates the board. And this is, by the way, you'll notice that all these players did this, and I want to name this as a really good strategy. If you know that you're going to draw multiple cards, drawing your first card off the top of the deck is wiser because it tells you a little bit more about whether you'd be interested in the birds. There I go, pouring water everywhere. We're pausing. All right, well, that was exciting, but not too bad for me. We'll pick up, I don't know where we were. I think David just drew cards. I think he has to discard a card. Angela is not going to be able to play out that crow at the beginning of the turn. I talked about this kind of tempo pacing at the beginning of the round here. It is just going to cost, one essentially like round of action, but I do think that it is a bit of a shame and is going to actually discard a bird here and a food. Oh, she's playing a bird. Oh, okay. She's going full into the drawing system here. And is not in a rush to lay out this crow. Says I can do some drawing stuff along the way here. Here is a different kind of goal. It's a goal. It's a tucker, one of the ones that you tuck a card behind and draw a card. It's also a star, I believe, and costs any resources. Costing any resources is great with the Oriole because a lot of times you can't. I guess it's not a goal, but it looks like a goal. Maybe it is, and I just have my search functions bad. What are you called? The ring-billed gull. Yeah, so a tucker that makes pebbles. Maybe the pebbles are the third round one, so maybe it's even a little bit better. But the fact that it requires 2 wild resources while you're playing with the Oriole is pretty nice because a lot of times those berries don't convert very well into birds, although we've seen a lot of counter examples of that with the cedar waxwing and the ring-billed gull this game, but that's not too common. Usually the berries are they become too profound, too common. Here's some more rats for Angela, but Henry flips what he needs, which is a grain off the roll. That would be, by the way, enough to play out that titmouse, so we'll have to see if he did draw into something else that he could play either with his first or second draw. David here, not happy with his options. It's a little bit of a bummer for him at this stage that he kind of keeps having to consume eggs to draw cards. I'm taking that to mean that he hasn't really drawn another water bird that he is interested in laying out there. But that being said, he also has plenty of eggs, and he kind of makes more eggs every time eggs are laid. So he has a pile of those eggs and can essentially draw on his stuff. He has to ask himself the question of like, how am I going to deal with my food engine in the long run? But he's got the cedar waxwing to make some even more berries. He gets some free berries off of Shaw. He's also going to get free grubs off of Shaw very soon. Is it Eastern something? I am going to imagine that Angela's going to draw 2 randoms here, although I wouldn't be too surprised to see a grab of that Bob White. It is pretty expensive, but it has a higher point scoring amount in it, since it's like 3 points up to 9 points with all the eggs on it, to run in an aggro with the Raven there. If the card that I'm thinking of is the card that I was thinking of, Shaw picked up the Eastern Phoebe, but we'll find out if I was correct or if it's something else. Extra draws from our ducks, lots and lots of randoms off the top of the deck, and some eggs here just for good measure. Shaw here grabs resources that are needed. One of them is going to be a rat for the incoming owl, and everybody gets some extra stuff along the way here. We'll point out that Angela is awkwardly at 2.5 resources in terms of playing out that bird again. Looking at the cards she drew, she did draw some pretty expensive cards, which is good. Looks like one of the rusty hawk or whatever, Ferriginous hawk or whatever the heck that is at the beginning of her hand, which is 6 points, and grosbeak there, which goes into the forest and is 6 points. Some nice expensive cards that she's going to be able to really convert those Raven food into just a bunch of scoring later on. Henry's got some resources, but actually doesn't go to play anything. He's going to rip some cards off the top of the deck. Frankly, if he doesn't know what he's looking for, Henry, I guess, is happy with that one. Poker face is certainly an option here to work on in the future. And the loon and the heron aren't really going to do anything while he's doing that. But, you know, if he's not in a rush to play out a second bird into the wetlands or the forest, he can take his time and just draw more cards and make the game plan, right? Because once you hit sort of the second half of the game, that's when drawing cards gets a little bit dicier. So that's why you're seeing a lot of these card draw actions early. Fish Crow here is monster good for David. The Fish Crow is, you know, it's the crow, it's the raven, it's a sort of a 6-point version of those guys that lets you eat an egg and turn it into a resource. And now suddenly David's grasslands row is generating up to 2 food per turn, and he just doesn't need to deal with the forest. It's a little bit awkward in this game where you kind of do want to play into the forest for the end round, but it is just so efficient to be able to take the eggs action and generate food along the way. It's one of the reasons why the ravens are so good. And David has functionally built his own raven system with the cedar waxwing and the fish crow here, which is really, really powerful. Angela here taking an action to pick up some resources so that she can finally play out that raven. I think I've demonstrated why I thought that the flow of food in the beginning was maybe a little bit awkward. Shaw here needs to get some eggs so that the great horned owl can be played, which is going to hook David up with a couple with a free egg along the way here. So he's definitely getting really, really good value out of that guy. And Henry is going to play, that looks like an American robin, something that can play with berries. I'm just getting told about these berries thing. This is a tuck bird, which is really nice to put in that center row there. Essentially is just a way to increase the scoring capacity of that center row. That's a nice draw for him. I wonder if that's the face that he made last round with the draw off the top of the deck. That would be my guess. Also gets him into that second column. So now if he wants to run that grasslands, it generates a food. It generates a card cycle for victory point if he's drawn some cards that he doesn't like, because he's drawn some randoms off the top of the deck. And of course, the 2 additional eggs. I'd say 2 eggs rather than 3 eggs because one of the eggs will become a food thanks to the crow. Presumably. I think it does make sense to basically just jam your eggs into food at this stage of the game. There's certain flow instances where that wouldn't be the case, where you need, you know, X number of eggs or whatever. But most of the time, I think that's going to be the way you want it to look like. All right, David here is going to run the egg row, including with the fish crow here. I think he's probably not going to eat food, so he's basically making 3 eggs. They're all having a laugh. My guess is that it's something about the complaining about the food, or maybe he's having a comment about how he's making a bad raven, or maybe something entirely. I don't know why I'm speculating on people's comedy. I have no idea. There's 3 eggs there. We're going to see one eaten by the fish crow and giving him any food of his choice. And then we're going to see if he pitches. He's drawn a lot of random cards this turn, so I wouldn't be surprised to see a pitch into the cedar waxwing for a berry and a victory point. He picked up a fish, which means he's, I think 100% playing into the wetlands. I think now that the fish crow has been played, there are no birds that care about fish except for fishy type birds. And he will throw onto the waxwing and then probably establish his wetland in the way that he should. We're going to see the Chihuahua Raven come down for Angela finally. And we are 4 actions into round 2. So in total, we're at 12 actions taken in a game of 11, 19, 26. So we're almost exactly, this next round will be exactly the halfway point in terms of actions taken throughout the course of the game. Of course, the impact of those actions does get bigger, as this is your classic engine builder structure, but, you know, not crazy bigger. Okay. We are seeing our friend the bird, which is maybe an Eastern Phoebe, coming down into the draw lands there. We don't need a second one up top because that's where the great horned owl can go. And Shaw is really having a problem with eggs. She's only going to be able to lay 2 eggs at a time. Running the grasslands row is not really doing the work that wants to be done. And Shaw there, very sportsmanlike and reminding David to run his... I should come up with the name of that bird. I keep saying that bird, the pink bird. Let's see if I can figure out what you are. You are a... Nope, not that one. You are a... It's easier because he's a pink bird, so there's only so many pink birds. I've somehow managed to miss all of them, though. Brown-headed cowbird. There we have it. All right, I missed Henry's action there. It looks like I think that was an egg lay, which makes sense because I don't think he laid eggs earlier this turn, did he? I think it might be an egg lay if I missed it already. Makes sense because David is not going to get the benefit of running the cowbird, and it gives Henry a food, which I think is what he grabbed, and cycles with the American Robin, sets up some eggs that he needs to play more birds. David's going to go for a reshuffle. He has the option here to run the fish crow, but instead actually just goes and looks for a certain food. This is a wild choice to me. I guess he doesn't have space to lay eggs out and maybe didn't have bird in his hand. This is a pretty bad turn. The fish crow itself just makes food. In fact, I think it was a mistake to roll. It looked like he didn't even get what he wanted. If you run the center row there, he lays an egg and then uses the fish crow to eat an egg to get a resource of his choice. And then he could just ignore the waxwing. So I think it's just strictly better for him at this stage to run the grassland over the forest. I might be missing something just with the zoomed outness, or I'm forgetting how many birds can get laid there, but I do think that was a mistake. Or I'm just misreading the body language and he was fine with it. Angela here runs a bad grassland in order to lay some eggs, get some food. David does not run his cowbird because there are no eggs removed, which again, actually, he would have been able to run the cowbird with the... Almost knocked over my water again. That's amazing. With the grassland, yeah, that's a rough beat. That's definitely a little bit of a misplay there. Shaw will lay 2 eggs. Her body language not looking too excited about the circumstances here. I gotta agree. I think that Shaw is in the worst position of all the players. So we'll definitely rub some respect on the struggle bus that we're seeing here. And Henry goes for laying more eggs. He doesn't actually have any more space to lay down in the wetlands there. And unfortunately for all these players, it might be that Angela is just going to get away with winning the objective for this turn. She's just got the most space, and other people have really not gotten a lot of those birds in play. Shaw does have space, but doesn't have good egg-laying capacity. We've got to see David play something out here, and sure enough, we do. We are seeing, he's doing a multiple play. So he's laying out into the forest here, along with a warbler. So this is just kind of like a handful of things to put into play, expanding out the little system here. Actually, he does not use the fish in the fishy way that I thought. He didn't draw the wheat that he was looking for very awkwardly. Yeah, that's a tough beating. And top of the deck must not have been cooperative to him, because I think playing into the wetlands and grasslands is really all he needs to do. Playing into the forest at this stage of the game seems a little silly. He should just be solving his food problems with his grassland for the most part. But if the cards aren't cooperating and he doesn't have a way to expand out his wetland to draw into more cards, there's nothing he can do about it. Barn Swallow here is going to greatly increase the scoring capacity of that center row there. Yep, so now every time eggs are laid, she's also going to cycle cards. That was planned from the beginning. Not from the beginning, from when she picked it up in round 1. Shaw sees kind of the one chance to pressure the wetlands thing. Also knows that ultimately she's going to need the eggs in one way or another. And David's not too unhappy with getting another free fire off of the cowbird there. Henry's going to be going first at the beginning of the next turn, so he's looking to probably lead with a cards action. He's got a couple cards. I think it looks like maybe 2 or 3 cards in hand there that he has organized maybe in a play, don't play, or vice versa sort of situation. Definitely a lot of laughs and smiles at this table. This is a good table. So he could run eggs right now because it doesn't, trigger David's thing, and it's pretty reasonable. I don't think he wants to draw cards right now because he'd rather draw cards at the beginning of next turn. Playing out something makes a lot of sense here. Playing out the sand, I think it's the Sandhill Crane, is a fun choice here because food seems to be relatively bountiful, although Henry not having a second forest thing has kind of made it a little bit annoying. The Sandhill Crane is quite expensive, but it is worth 5 points and can just eat grain for 2 victory points, essentially being tucked from the deck throughout the course of the game. It's also a Pebble Bird, if I'm right that third round is looking for Pebble Birds. So good point scoring capacity there, but of course it is going to be a drain on the resources. Originally at the beginning of the game, I said Henry was making lots and lots of food, but that forest engine has kind of stalled. So we'll have to see what he can make of it. David, I think, laid eggs, which makes sense. Laying eggs is one of his primary ways of getting food, and he actually grabs himself a fish. So maybe I am right. He is interested in having that fish situation get played out. And then Angela's going to run eggs and is going to take first place in this round objective. I don't think really anybody could stop it. Shaw did the best possible by getting up to 5 eggs, but Angela unfortunately just had the extra gas. Although, does Angela have exactly... Oh no, also 5 eggs. It's a tie there. So actually, I don't know, it's 6 eggs, but it will be 5 eggs if you're running the Raven. She's going to decide to... That's actually a tough choice. I don't think that would be my default choice here, because in the second round you're going from 5 points down to 2 points. So it costs 3 points and an egg to get these 2 resources right now. Now, if you're concerned about there being enough resources in the rest of the game, that's fine. But I think that Angela's got some time to get the resources that are needed for her admittedly expensive hand, but also because Shaw is going to be flooding folks with extra food. I think that I would have opted not to eat the Raven's food at this point in time. So wait, is it 5 plus 2 down 3? So maybe it's only a 2-point difference, which, okay, if it's, yeah, I gotta remember exactly what the Wingspan end round scoring is. Kingbird here for playing into the forest, that actually usually at this stage in the game is horrible, but given what we know about the end game goal of playing into the forest, is actually going to generate a fair amount of food if someone was interested in grabbing the pretty easy to play Kingbird at this stage. So I wouldn't hate that choice. Burrowing Owl is kind of a solid mid choice that could be made here. And Henry says, you know what, I'm just going to actually run the egg row. There isn't anything that I'm super juiced about, and I can always just use the American Robin to cycle something out of my hand that I'm not as excited for. I'll be curious to see if he actually eats this grain with the sandhill crane. He does. That's maximizing his points for sure. But he's going to need to get food to play out into other places. Of course, the crow is going to give him one of those food, but oftentimes you'll need multiple. Let's see what he grabs off the top of the deck. Doesn't like what I said about the kingbird. It's not a lot of points. So yeah, it's fair that it's only going to trigger a handful of times before the end of the game. He wants something a little bit juicier. Henry looking at his hand very poker professional style, the full block there. I kind of like David's position until the latter half of the second round there, where I think things got a little bit shakier with having to play into the forest in the way that he did. He's got this issue of being too full on eggs, like actually playing into the forest. I would suspect is primarily an expression of the cards that he has in his hand and the need to have more places for eggs. That is one of the problems generally of the the egg layer power birds or not power birds strategy is like, do I run out of space? This is something that is actually going really well on Angela's board, is that she has tons of egg laying capacity, which is currently underutilized. I think kind of from the flow. So maybe there is something to be said about her sort of slower play out of things as opposed to the Raven Rush that I had been suggesting, because we're seeing that limitation on David's board right now with the amount of egg space that's available. Part of that too on David's board is that he's gotten a bunch of free eggs off of the cowbird, which generally is not a bad thing. He is happy to pick up the burrowing owl, which will go and fill him the fourth column in that row. It's also a starbird, so helps him work towards that round objective. And then rips a random off the top. If he doesn't have a wetland bird, I think that kingbird again could have been a viable option for him. He is only using his egg row as his food system, and so getting a couple extra things would not be too terrible. But if he's got something to play into the wetland already, then it's fine. That being said, I have to assume that he didn't, because he drew before playing into the wetland. So we'll have to see. Maybe he just isn't going to play wetland birds anymore at all. Angela's going to play probably into the egg row here with big golden eagle. Big pile of points. We're going to eat, I think, just one of those eggs and a whole bunch of rats. Big point birds being drawn off the top of the deck for Angela here are a huge deal. That's another way that a Raven strategy can lose, is just essentially at the whim of the deck. If you draw kind of a bunch of mid birds, it can really kill you. Shaw's going to draw a Cooper's Hawk here, hoping to contest that sort of end round or end game objective. And everybody, okay, I'm right. It is an Eastern Phoebe. Everybody gets some resources. The bounty of sharing. The problem that Shaw has is that she's the only one who's sharing. If David or Henry kind of had hopped in on this game plan with her, it'd be good for them. But because she's doing all the sharing, it's unfortunately a little bit tougher. I still think sharing is one of the few counter strategies to someone with a leading Raven in the game. And given the other two players have crows, I really like that this is the path that Shaw chose. I think that just a handful of other things have gotten in the way. I mean, the birds are not ideal. There are no birds in the grasslands. It's hard to score points, but just in terms of like keeping the engine alive, definitely have to rub some respect on using sharing strategy, which I think is underutilized in Wingspan. People just don't want to give away freebies to other people. Henry's going to run that egg row again. It's really too bad he doesn't have a fourth bird there for an additional egg, but being able to run the crane, the robin, and the crow is just a lot of flexibility. It is a very good egg row. It's not quite as good as Angela's egg row. It is better than David's egg row, though. And right now it's generating 3, 4, 5, 6 points every time he's running it. Well, really 5 points in a food every time he's running it. Well, it costs him a food. So it's generating 5 points every time he's running it. but also some flexibility, some cycling of like what card gets drawn, what food is there. I don't think that it is the singular thing he can run to end the game with, but it scores a good chunk of points while he's working through the cycle of figuring out what am I going to play next, what are the food resources that I need to play, the next cards that I need to play. It's nice for him. He's really struggling here. I wonder if he's debating whether he's playing out some other bird or working towards a certain other kind of bird. I will note that it is interesting that he chose to draw off the top of the deck rather than that trumpeter swan right there, which is a great way of turning food resources into, I think it's like 9 points. But admittedly, it's in, the bottom row, which is becoming rapidly less and less important as the game pushes closer and closer to its conclusion. David might be interested in the trumpeter swan, but drawing cards kind of is awkward for him. So I'm not sure that he's going to choose to do that. The other thing with food is that Henry can expect that there's a decent chance that more worms or more berries will be coming in at various points in the game. So I would deprioritize taking those and higher prioritize taking some other resources that he needs. In a vacuum, he's just going to take a grain because it runs the Sandhill Crane. David here is going to lay out, grab some stuff with the fish crow. Pretty much at maximum, I think nearly maximum capacity here. Eat one of them. And then we'll see if he pitches something to the cedar waxwing. He does. He's drawn a lot of cards. They seem to just not kind of be exactly what he's looking for. The fish crow was the best card that he's played so far. It was very, very good for his position for the time that he needs it. But I'll say otherwise, not too impressed with his card draws. I would say in terms of the cards cooperating, Angela certainly is at the top of the list there, getting the Raven at the beginning, getting the Barn Swallow, drawing into expensive cards that we know that she has in her hand to match with the Raven. But I would say Henry's probably second. That aggro is a really good setup, and those are all pretty solid birds for what he's got going on. David, I thought, was in a good position, but he seems to just sort of has stalled out a little bit. It's just kind of running a little bit slowly at this stage. David's cowbird has done so much work this game, though. I feel like it's fired off. I haven't kept track, but like 8 times or something. I'm probably over exaggerating, but it's fired off a lot of times. Let's hunt. That goose is too big for that eagle. It's pretty funny because I've seen a golden eagle hunt a goat. A goose doesn't really seem like it should be that difficult. And we run the Raven. Angela at this point is essentially just matching resources to things in her hand. She'd really like to play a 4th bird into the wetland there, or grassland there, but maybe she doesn't have one. I know that she's got a pile of green cards. So they might just be a bunch of forest plays essentially in the last round of the game here. We're going to see Shaw finally get into the grasslands row here with an Eastern Kingbird. And hopefully get some free resources along the way that will make her life a little bit easier and allow for some end game scoring. Angela is going to oblige Shaw several times over the course of this game for sure. I'm not so sure that David and Henry will. I can't tell if Henry is holding another forest bird or if he's essentially just decided, thanks to freebies and the American Crow, I don't need to mess with the forest anymore. But that being said, the forest is the last round objective. It's just going to keep on running this same engine here. Not having a 4th bird there and running it several times does definitely hurt a little bit. But, like we said, it's 5 points and or flexibility along the way here. It might just be the best option that he has, right? 5 points over and over again. He is going to hit an egg cap at some point. pretty nearly now, I think. But it does make sense to run it while David's cowbird is tired. He grabbed the trumpeter swan, I think, which is just a lot of points. He does need to find the way to get those resources, but they're wild resources for the trumpeter swan, or many wild resources. So hopefully Shaw will come to save the day there for him, which I respect. Looks like we're getting, is that a bush tit that's getting played out here? If it is, it's going in the center row. Okay. We finally are getting something into the drawing row here. I said center row because the drawing row, it's late. I'm trying to see how many cards David has in his hand. I guess he does still value drawing cards because the cedar waxwing and everything like that. But the bush tit, if it is a bush tit, is great to put in the center row because it cycles cards, just scores lots of points. Angela will pick up a snowy egret here, which is a nice way to play multiple birds at the same time, which is a great ability for the crow to have. And then she will rip a roadrunner off the top, which is a pretty good draw in terms of points and being able to go into the grasslands. Yeah, the nice draws kind of just keep coming. I think we're moving on to Shaw's turn, but we are supposed to refill the tray. Shaw's not interested though, but Henry will keep the game state stable. I like those birds, the ones that lay on all birds of a certain egg type. That's those are fun surprises. You know, they don't work all the time. I see a Cooper's hawk coming down here rather than the great horned owl. That's interesting. It's cheaper certainly, so just easier to drop into play. I think that the plan ultimately is to play both. But if you're planning on playing both, the owl is a little bit better at hunting. So I would be inclined to play that out first. I'd be curious to see what the follow-up is here. But I think the owl is preferable given that the amount of rats is sufficient. Henry here debating his options. I wonder if he's been waiting a while for some free resources. He can't play the trumpeter swan just yet. And he does actually give David a run of the cowbird, not being able to draft off of Angela or Shaw, choosing to plant eggs. And yeah, we'll fill out. He debates whether he's going to do it. He says it's 2 points. If I don't get the 2 points, it's going to put me behind. But it does throw off his tempo. We are, it looks like, 4 actions into the round. Yeah, 4 actions into the 6 action round. The reason I'm pointing that out is that if I am right that it is pebbles for that objective this turn, the trumpeter swan wants to come down next round so they can lay eggs on it. But it might not happen, especially given that he scooped up a second worm. Not a ton of cards left that use 2 grubs. There's like victory point cards, and then also the migrator bird that moves into 2 spaces. It's way too late for a migrator bird. David's gonna run his middle row. Kind of expected actually a card draw, given that he played the bush tit into the bottom row there, because he must know what he needs with the fish crow, and what he needs is a rat. It's fascinating. We've seen a lot of hawks come down so far this game. I'm trying to think of what other hawks there are out there that are, might be one of the 5-pointer guys. Here we're going to see 2 grubs go out for probably that 7-point, I don't know, big-breasted yellow guy. We also drew the 8-point big-breasted yellow guy. Seems good. And hurrah for Shaw's Kingbird firing off pretty much immediately. Actually, I guess it was 2 rounds, but still. All right, ending action 4 of round 3 here as we're kind of essentially entering the closing laps of the game. We're going to see a lot of players essentially cashing out what they have, running egg rows, and that's what we're going to see a lot of for the rest of the game. Oh, I see. So multiple hawks is the answer to why not the big owl. I'm sure the big owl will still come, but that makes sense. Playing a couple out there and being able to cycle. Sure. So this is like the violet something or other. It's just a bird that cycles. It's like the American robin, just as a way to expand the row there. A little bit awkward for Henry in that I think I wonder if he just drew it off the top of the deck, sure, but if he pivoted plans and decided that he was going to play it this round rather than last round, I get the vibe like it wasn't the draw off the top of the deck. But if it was, this makes a lot of sense. If it wasn't, I think it meant that he sort of switched plans partway through, which will have cost him essentially 1 victory point in terms of just the tempo sequencing of those things. I think he maybe was hoping for something to happen. And it is tough to anticipate what a player in Shaw's position is going to do in terms of giving stuff out to other players, because it's tough to anticipate exactly the flow people are in unless it's very, very obvious what their next play is. Usually in Wingspan, there's a couple different ways, and I really mean a couple, like 2 different ways to kind of get to the spot you're trying to get to. Here's the burrowing owl that we saw picked up all the way at the beginning of the round for David. That's, I said, what's the rat for? But of course, it's the burrowing owl, which I for sure knew that he had in his hand and forgot about. Now is the yellow breasty guy. More stuff for Shaw. Hooray, a little bit late. Angela right now is sitting on something like 15, 17, 21, 2, 30 points in birds, something like that. Compared to, let's see, 12, 15, 17, 21, 23 for Shaw maybe. 2, 7, 8, 12, 18, 24, 29 for Henry. So actually pretty close. And then like 6, 9, 11, 17, 22, 25 maybe for David or something like that. So actually the bird points are kind of close all over. Shaw definitely a little bit behind. Eggs goes to David, followed by Henry, I think. So, but then we do have to look at the objectives where I guess essentially not Henry, right? Because David ended up winning the first round. Yeah. Oh, topping all the way back to the first round, I think I'm realizing that I was talking about... No, it was the second round that I was talking about giving up the egg. I wonder if I feel like I didn't realize that David won the first round somehow. I think I drew a blank on that. And he's going to run through his system here. Right now, it's scoring 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points on a maximum. One of those points probably turns into a food. But this is a very good food. This is a very good row. He is running into the capacity issues that David was running into. And of course, this is that's the highest side, assuming that Henry has access to that wheat to make sure that he's running the Sandhill Crane. But it's a lot of points there. If he can get some capacity for the birds and run it a handful of times, he's doing okay. You see him literally counting out how many actions he has left. And is he going to fill his board? That question that comes up a lot at the end. How many times am I going to run my egg row? Do I have enough eggs capacity to do this? No. Okay, I need to play another bird out. What's the best bird that I can play? And now I'll run my egg row a whole bunch of times at the end of the game. I know there's some people who don't really like that aspect of Wingspan. You kind of just like score points at the end of the game, but like I think it's kind of honest. It's like pretty honest to what board games are. So I don't have a problem with it myself. I kind of poo-pooed Angela's Morning Dove earlier, but it actually has done a ton of work being a card that went into the wetlands, which was really essential for her. And also just generating egg capacity. So definitely a good call on her part to keep that card in the opening hand. I do think it's a little bit better in other circumstances, but it did its job. It's more than done its job. That's what I'm saying. Is that a double bird play off the top? Oh man, what a draw. That is amazing. If it's not a double bird, it's it might be a bonus card bird. Either way, that's a great draw. I think it's actually the bonus card bird, which is like 4 points. And then I consider bonus cards to be 3 points. Sometimes you get lucky and get more. Sometimes you totally whiff, but 3 points is like usually how many points you're going to score off of one of those. Desperate need for eggs for Shaw. She'll even convert some food into it. And chooses to do so in the aftermath of Angela having done so that David is not able to run the cowbird. End of round, we're going to get a triple tie for everyone but Henry on the objectives. Think that he has a great egg row, kind of the best engine out there, but missing out on all those points is rough for him. That being said, watching ties over and over again is a big deal. So Henry is in a lot of ways getting saved by the number of ties that are being generated across the different players here. It might even be another tie this round for Angela and Shaw going into the forest. I think that they are both gunning for that 5, which makes a ton of sense. They should be. It's points to play out the birds, and the bonus for winning first uncontested is like 7 points, which is a game-winning number of points at this stage of the game. David can't just run the egg row to end the game. He's running pretty low. He's got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7, something like that amount of space on his board. Looks like he doesn't have any food available to him, so he's going to rip some random cards off the top of the deck. Usually you see someone grab a bald eagle at this stage of the game. That being said, he still has the opportunity to grab it with both the bush tit and the turn here. And doesn't like the random card he drew off the top. Says, it's going to be hard for me to get the resources to play the bald eagle, so I've got other stuff going on. Gotta say, I'm still a fan of having played the bush tet in the grasslands, given that he's really kind of only run the wetlands, like, I think 1 time since he's played it there. Maybe 2. An egg lay here for Angela, along with some resources. The other kind of funny thing that she doesn't do in this instance is you can spend a food to get an egg, which is not commonly a good trade, but because the Raven spends a food to get an egg to get 2 food, you can. Angela, however, just has a lot of need for food. She has a lot of huge cards in her hand. She's planning on playing as many of them as possible. She's definitely going to be strapped on the kind of actions left. It looks like she's putting forth a pelican as she's kind of counting her hand, which is going to, I think, rebate some resources, ? And so she's going to play like a double play into the wetlands. Forest is her ideal, but I think that she might actually only end up with 4 in the forest. This is not an ideal play for Shaw here. I think this is like a 4 or 5 point bird, but it costs 2 eggs to play. I think I wouldn't be playing this in her position. Just not interested in drawing more cards. It doesn't help with the end of round objective. It might be that it's helping with a bonus card in her hand, and so it actually is evaluated at +3 or +4 points for that reason, which would make sense. I would have to assume that that's the case, because otherwise it is a very strange play. Henry running the pretty spicy grassland engine here. Again, kind of coming up pretty close to this the cost here. He will spend the grain to max out the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points that he's going to get this turn. I should say 7, because I'm sure he's going to use the crow as well. And he's not interested in the bald eagle either because he's got the trumpeter swan available to him. And Henry is just going to acknowledge that he is not getting this round's objective either. Fourth in all, or I guess he got third in the second round. But yeah, just kind of did not play to the objectives. And again, you know, the objectives are a response of what cards you're drawing. But I think Henry has seen the most cards this game, given the amount of cycling that he has. Angela's drawn a decent chunk of cards thanks to the duck and the barn swallow, so that might be that. David's drawn a decent number of cards. Yeah, maybe it's close. It'd be a fun statistic to know. I should count it. Not going to. I think David is in trouble here. I don't get the vibe like he has anything terribly exciting in his hand that he wants to play. He's out of space, so he needs to be playing stuff so that he can continue running the egg row. He can't really contest the forest. He knows that Shaw is going to come out with another forest creature. He knows that it's likely that Angela is going to come out with another 1 or 2. And he doesn't have the food to really make that a reality either. A fifth bird in the grassland is okay. Yeah, he just doesn't have a lot of oomph here. An action to claim 2 food says, I know that I need to play out my birds. And grabbing a berry and a grub suggests to me one of those like forest birds that draws bonus cards. It's kind of the highest that he can accomplish there, I think. Might be that he runs the fish crow to get some like a third resource, and it could be a catbird or a warbler or something like that. Golden eagle tries to hunt another big hawk because they're red-shouldered hawk. Too big. Couple whiffs on that golden eagle, which is not that common. So at least some unluck there. And some resources from the Chihuahua Raven. I wouldn't be surprised if that was Angela's last egg action of the game. There's going to be at least 2 play birds actions. So maybe 1 more egg lay action. She's counting out her resources there. Shaw absolutely needs some more resources to round the corner here, so is going to grab and then reroll, as I'm sure she's not in need of any of those berries. And one of those rats is going to be for sure, or actually the only rat is going to be the pickup there for her. Depending on what she has in her hand, I could absolutely see her discarding a card to get another resource, but she does not. She might be down to just the 1. Like literally might be the owl in hand. A hit and a miss on the hawks. And does not disseminate the free berry to folks, knowing exactly what she needs or doesn't need essentially until the end of the game. Henry runs the system. I keep talking about how he's like full up on eggs, but because the crow eats eggs, it does slow down the sort of spam of everything being filled up. Stacks and stacks and stacks of cards there. That's fun. He is going to dominate in that scoring category, so that's a nice bonus. Yeah, we're going to see just a lot of egg running as we round out the game here. Oh, looks like it's me behind. Is that me? I actually can't tell. I think it is me because I think I saw the bottom of my tattoo on my arm. But I don't remember playing a game. Oh, we're playing Great Western Trail. That's what's going on there. All right, here we get our egret to play twice into the wetlands. Nom 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 nom. All sorts of eggs. This stage doesn't really matter what eggs are taken. And oh, I was wrong about Henry grabbing the trumpeter swan. I must have missed Angela grabbing the trumpeter swan ages ago. Apologies for that error on my side. Good old 9-pointer. I think Shaw's going to play the Great Horned Owl. Finally, the coming of the Great Horned Owl. It has been heralded for ages. And it looks like she's got about like 45 points in birds or something like that. It's maybe about like 36 for Shaw. About 30 for Henry still. Hasn't really changed. I think that means the same for David. Yeah, about 30 over there as well. So that's except for Shaw, is about a 15-point gap for Angela on those. Henry does have an absolute pile of tucked cards, but no objectives, though the objectives are admittedly lower scoring because of the ties. Egg-wise, we're looking at 3, 5, 8, 12, 15 for Henry, who just realized it's his turn. Only like 2 for Shaw. 4, 6, 10, 14, 15. About like 20-ish for David. 6, 7, 8. Only about 8 for Angela. It's actually going to be a pretty close game. I think that Henry has done a good job of keeping it as close as possible. I think his last actions here are going to be a little bit awkward. Because I didn't see him lay eggs there, but I think he was already nearly at maximum capacity. So he might just be running essentially like a 4 or 5 point row here. But that being said, 4 or 5 points is a solid turn at the end of the game. It's not the dream, but it's definitely not bad. Problem is he's got 2 actions left, right? And so it might just be that he's running 4 or 5 points, which his opponents are going to be able to do that. So if he thinks that he's there, then good. Maybe it comes down to the bonus cards, and we're going to see a bonus card bird from David here. Maybe that actually is the answer right there about why the bush tit doesn't get played in the middle. He knew that he needed to play the Sprague's Pit or whatever it is, as well as the barn owl into the grasslands row. So yeah, I've got to definitely show some respect for David understanding what the flow of his hand was, and I actually should have anticipated that the bush tit was a response to that. And it's kind of funny. It's pretty bad for the bush tit not using its actions, but it does have 5 egg capacity, which I had been commented on endlessly about how David really needed that extra egg capacity for the actions that he was taking. Angela's going to take one final egg row action here, do some hunting. I think she did convert a food into an egg there, and then is going to take resources probably that are needed to play 4th forest bird. Yep, we're going to eat an egg. It's got to be a 4th forest bird because we see that Shaw is very unlikely. I think she's out of cards in hand. It's very unlikely to play another forest bird. So that means that Angela is going to be in a position of tying again for first, which bummer for Shaw, who I appreciate had kind of like just a struggle city game and said, you know what, I'm going to go for the objectives. And unfortunately for Shaw, that works out very poorly, tying with Angela a whole bunch. But the other players are quite grateful for her sacrifice at the altar of trying to find a way to score her own points. And unfortunately, getting shot down by Angela's process here. A couple eggs for Shaw. Anticlimactic. Actually, I think we might be seeing that Shaw should have distributed that Baltimore Oriole berry because she could have used it for an extra egg. Henry's not laying very many eggs at this stage. He's basically just doing double tucking and get a grain with one of the with the one egg. So he's basically running 4-point turns. Definitely would have liked to play another bird out at some point, but I guess it just didn't essentially work out between the resource costs and everything like that. A one-hit roll. The barn owl snags a rat with a single die. I gotta say, those owls with the die rolling always works with one die. It never works with 3 or 4 dice. That is just good math there. And we see Angela is going to end the game with a lottery spin with the Bell's Vireo. That 4th bird going into that spot there. I think we're in that's, I believe, her last action. She's debating the 2 choices, but not for very long. It was a pretty quick check. That usually means that one of them is pretty obvious, or both of them were pretty obvious, but she didn't have, Angela has a good poker face. She didn't have the face of someone who just totally whiffed, but who knows? Eggs out there for Shaw, who actually does get to lay the extra egg thanks to the king bird there doing its work. So no need to have shared that berry with the Baltimore Oriole. Henry running the sand crane, and he's not going to run the crow in the last system here. And let me pause briefly so I can get the scores and report those back to you. All right, well, they didn't say the scores out loud, so I kind of had to look over Angela's shoulder as she was using her as her phone to count the score. So again, she's just helping me out the most here. Her ending score was 90, and David's was 88. Those were the top 2 players I know. Shaw, I think, was in the like late 60s, maybe early 70s. And then Henry had 36 points in cards face down. And then I think we know that he had about 30 points in birds. That's 66 right there, plus whatever he had in his bonus card. So I think that he probably was actually like mid 70s, maybe 80s. I think his system looked very threatening, but he just didn't have enough infrastructure on the board to close that gap there. Plus 0 points and end round points really makes a big difference there. So congratulations to Angela for winning that at 90. 90 is definitely a score that is surmountable even with the Ravens. So I think it's a little bit of a lower scoring game, in large part because of the fact that there were a lot of ties for the objectives along the way that made things a little bit more difficult for players. And while I said at the beginning, hey, Shaw played a couple birds that were sharing, they actually ended up not sharing a ton, and no one else did any sharing either, which tends to elevate scores as well. So really fun game to watch. Congratulations to all the competitors for making it to the finals, and thanks for watching. Have a great day.